Chapter 3 The Search for Hyde. Page 20. Utterson returned home, learning nothing from Lanyon. In his large, dark bed, he tossed and turned as the night crept slowly by. Unanswered questions and fearful thoughts filled his mind. The bells of the nearby church struck 6 o'clock as Utterson continued his sleepless night. He felt trapped as he tossed in the darkness of his room. Mr. Enfield's story went by in his mind like pictures in a book. He replayed the scene over and over. The little man, the screaming child, the family, the doctor, and finally the awful face of Hyde. But he saw no face, really, only a blank figure in a nightmare with frantic people and a child who had been scared to death. Page 21. He kept turning that story over in his mind, played out just like Enfield had explained it. He must meet this monster, this man mentioned in Dr. Jekyll's will. He was sure that if he did meet him, he would hate him. From that night on, Utterson made it his mission to find Mr. Hyde. He began to hang around the area of the door. He was there in the mornings, again in the afternoon, and then he watched the door patiently by the light of the moon. If he is Mr. Hyde, he thought, I will be Mr. Seek. At last his patience was rewarded. It was a cold, dry night, and the street lamps shone dimly through the fog. By 10 o'clock, all the shops had closed, and London was silent. Mr. Utterson stood at the corner near the mysterious door, watching and listening. Suddenly, he became aware of footsteps coming toward him. The steps grew louder as they came closer. Utterson eased his head from around the corner of the building and saw a small, plainly dressed man. Page 22. The man quickly crossed the street and held out a key toward the door. Utterson stepped out of the shadows and tapped the man on the shoulder as he passed. Mr. Hyde, I think? Mr. Hyde shrank back, hissing loudly, and would not look Utterson in the face. That is my name. What do you want? I see you are going in, said Utterson. I am an old friend of Dr. Jekyll's. I am Utterson of Gaunt Street. Surely he has mentioned my name. I wonder if I could see him. I assume you are also a friend, as I see you have a key to his home. I'm afraid Dr. Jekyll is not at home, Mr. Utterson, Hyde said, shielding his face. How did you know me? Ah, I could be wrong, said Utterson. So will you do me a favor? With pleasure, replied Hyde. What shall it be? Will you let me see your face? Hyde hesitated. Then, with an air of cockiness, he jerked his head around and faced Utterson with a snarl. The two stared at each other. Now I will know you if I see you again. It's good to put a face with a name. It may be useful. Yes, said Mr. Hyde, and it may be that you will need my address some day. I live in Soho, 339 Blanchard Street. He must know that I hold Jekyll's will, thought Utterson. And now, Mr. Utterson, said Hyde, how did you know me? Just from conversations with friends we have in common, Utterson said. Friends in common, Hyde said hoarsely. Who are they? Jekyll, for instance, said the lawyer. Hyde's face became red. He leaned toward Utterson. Why do you lie? He cried. Such rude language, Utterson began. With that, Hyde broke into a savage laugh. He quickly unlocked the door and disappeared into the house. Utterson stood for a while in silence. Then he began to walk slowly up the street with his hand to his forehead. He was no less confused now than he was before the meeting. Mr. Hyde was pale and dwarfish, but not quite deformed. He had a displeasing smile. He acted both timid and bold, and spoke in a husky, whispering, broken voice. These qualities, all put together, disgusted and frightened Utterson. The man seems hardly human, muttered Utterson. He seems to have a beastly soul. Oh, my poor friend, Henry Jekyll, are you truly a friend of this fiend who looks like a devil? Just around the corner from the cross street was a section of handsome houses. Utterson walked toward one of them and knocked loudly on the door. A well-dressed, elderly servant opened the door. Is Dr. Jekyll at home, Poole? Asked the lawyer. I will see, Mr. Utterson, said the servant. He led the visitor into a wide, low-roofed hall paved with flagstones. "Please wait here by the fire." Utterson sat in a large leather chair. This familiar room had always been a comfortable place to Utterson, but tonight he shuddered as he looked into the fire. It brought back to his mind the evil face of Hyde, and he began to feel quite ill. He was somewhat relieved when Poole returned to say that Dr. Jekyll was out for the evening. "I saw Mr. Hyde go in by the back door, Poole. Is that common when Dr. Jekyll is away?" "Yes, sir," replied Poole. "Mr. Hyde has a key." "Dr. Jekyll seems to have a great deal of trust in Mr. Hyde, Poole." "Yes, sir, he does indeed," replied Poole. "We all have orders to obey him. We see very little of him, however. He never dines here. He mostly comes and goes through the laboratory door on the back side of the house." "Well, give my best to Jekyll." "Good night, Poole," said Utterson. "I will, Mr. Utterson. Good night, sir." The lawyer left the house of his friend with a heavy heart. He felt that Henry Jekyll was in deep trouble. Henry must have dark secrets. Indeed, Hyde was one of them. Was it possible that the ugly, evil man would do something dreadful to Jekyll? After all, he was named in Jekyll's will as the only heir. Night was falling, and Utterson walked home in fear of something terrible yet to come.